What up, guys? Welcome to the Son of Wonder. Kung Fu Panda 4 has hit theaters, so let's conversationalize. Alright guys, Kung Fu Panda 4 has arrived, and I grew up with the Kung Fu Panda movies. I absolutely loved the first one and the second one as a kid. The third one I thought was kind of mediocre, but not terrible. So when I first heard that they were doing a Kung Fu Panda 4, I was like, yes, we're finally getting one, that's awesome. But then I started looking at the casting list, and then I started looking, or I saw like a synopsis for it, and then my excitement levels dwindled greatly. Like, I wasn't feeling it. And then the trailers came out, and I definitely wasn't feeling it. I was like, I don't know if I like what we're doing here. And I have seen the movie now, and unfortunately, I personally, my fears were apparently warranted, at least for me. I'm gonna go with a non-spoiler review on this one, but I will still be giving, very vague details about what I didn't like about it, what I did like. And unfortunately, I think what I did like is there's not a lot. First of all, I think when it comes down to it, the writing of this movie just did not work. And I mean, that comes down to the dialogue. Like, it's one of those movies where they literally feel like, clearly whoever wrote this felt like the audience was like really dumb. So they kept saying everything that you knew was in the characters' heads as if the audience was dumb. Like, oh, this is bad, or oh, this, or oh, that. They would just say everything instead of showing anything. It was very annoying in that regard. And all of the clever kind of charm that was in the first and second ones especially just feels sucked out of this one, to the point where basically what I would say a good summary of this movie would be is they really wanted more money from the Kung Fu Panda franchise, so they just did the most base level version of making a fourth one. Like, there's no extra nuance. The things that happen with the characters don't really feel all that earned. And because of that, it just feels like a lifeless husk of a movie that's like, meant to be superficially entertaining, but not any deeper than that. Which is really frustrating, because the first and second ones I thought had a really deep story that taught powerful lessons. And, this movie sort of kind of goes for the lesson of change. And I could go with that, except again, just with the characters and the execution of it, it just doesn't feel like you really got anything from it by the end of it. As well as, this isn't a spoiler, it's pretty obvious from the trailer, but I guess it's kind of spoilery, so just be warned. But it comes down to a plot line that has been kind of running rampant throughout a lot of different Hollywood projects for the last few years, and that is, let's retire the main character and replace him with somebody else. And it's not fully that. That's what I was worried it was going to be from the trailer, but it's not fully that. But it still feels like it. And I personally, I don't like Awkwafina and stuff. I'm sorry, I just don't. She is the side character, the main side character, if you will, in this one. She's the fox. And I don't like her voice. And when you don't like somebody's voice acting or whatever, and you have to hear it throughout the entire film, it does get a little distracting. And so it was, at least for me. And on top of that, just her character wasn't all that compelling. I feel like another problem with this movie is that I feel like they go for every trope in the book. Different just story things that are very predictable, and as an audience, you're just used to it, especially in kids' movies. And I feel like these days, what Hollywood is making for kids' content is not what they were making before. What they were making before, back in the 90s, you had, I guess it's not really kids' content, but you had Batman the Animated Series, you had the first two Kung Fu Panda movies, and I'm talking about, content that kids could consume, and it was kid-friendly content while still being thought-provoking and deep, and adults could still enjoy it. But I feel like we just moved away from that, and we've treated kids like they were Dumber and Dumber, even though they aren't. And so now we get movies like this, which I feel like is a great reflection of the times, unfortunately, where it's like, we once had some really deep, thought-provoking kids content, and now we've just moved on to the very superficial. It's like, hey, let's just make another Kung Fu Panda movie and not really do anything with it. That's another thing that's frustrating about this one, is that you could tell that there are parts of this movie that have a lot of potential, and could have made for a much better story once you get to the end. But instead, they go for the much more mediocre and, not nearly as poignant version. And like I said, it just feels hollow at the end of it all. And they bring certain characters back and do not really hardly anything with them. As well as the villain of this movie, I think, is by far the worst villain of the Kung Fu Panda franchise. And that's honestly a part of the Kung Fu Panda franchise that I thought was one of its strongest elements. For at least the first two films especially, where it was like you had Tai Lung in the first movie, and he was this very powerful villain who was intimidating, he was menacing, but he had a phenomenal backstory, like he felt like he was rejected by Shifu and all that stuff, and he felt like being the Dragon Warrior was practically his birthright. That's another thing, like the voice talent. They got Ian McShane, he's in the John Wick movies if you don't know, to play Tai Lung in the first movie, and he brought such gravitas, and Gary Oldman brought such gravitas to the Peacock Shin, who was the villain of the second movie, and I feel like we don't have that here. Like, Viola Davis does the chameleon in this movie, and it's like, it's okay, but it's like the most base level, like, villain whatever. Like, she doesn't have a good motivation as a bad guy. There's no compelling story there. It's just bad guy, and that is especially frustrating when you have such great villains in previous entries in the franchise. And on top of that, again, when it comes to Po himself, I guess he learned some stuff, but again, at the end of the day, it's like I said, because of the way they executed the story, because you don't even know if you really want or feel like Po needs to go on this journey, because his whole thing in the first three films was becoming the best Dragon Warrior he could be. And I understand kind of what they're going for in this movie with what they try to do with the whole change thing, but I don't know. It just does not play out the way that I feel it should. And maybe there's a version of the story, a version of changing Po, and maybe and again, this is from the trailer, so this isn't really a spoiler, promoting him above Dragon Warrior that could have worked. But I feel like they just didn't do enough character work and story work, or at least didn't do it properly to warrant that kind of a change by the end of the film. So, unfortunately, I was definitely disappointed in this one. I wanted it to be good, but even from the trailers and the get-go, I was just like, I don't know about this. And like I said, unfortunately, my fears were warranted. But maybe, I'm pretty sure Kung Fu Panda 5 is happening, so maybe once we get there, we'll redeem this one somehow. But as it stands now, this one was not great. But thank you guys for watching. Have a very blessed day. May the Lord be with you. May the Force be with you. Goodbye. And that's a wrap.